formally get started here, I will start by introducing myself. My name is Terry Ball, and I'm the Senior Programs Manager here at Californians for the Arts. Now, they swear to me that's not just because I'm the eldest person on staff, but I'm still a little skeptical. Um, we are here to talk to you about the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund. As I said, please introduce yourself in the chat. Um, I want to introduce the other members of our team who are here with us today. I have Beatrice Casagran, is part of our Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund team. And in her other life, she is the artistic director of Ophelia's Jump. We in Greater Los Angeles area. We also have with us Martha Dimson, who is part of our team. And in her other life, she is involved with both TIPSCA, the Theater Producers of Southern California, and also with Open Fist in Los Angeles. And the final member of our team here today is Sophie Lynn, who is running the slides, who is part of our team and a fabulous young lighting designer. Beatrice will be manning the Q&A, and you are welcome to include questions at any time. Martha will be manning the chat, including that links document that I talked about. Please do put all of your questions into the Q&A and not into the chat. Martha will give you friendly reminders if you do. That does two things. Number one, it keeps everything consolidated in one place, so Beatrice can be keeping track of everything and not missing anything, and we can share it. But also, as part of that follow-up email, you will get a copy of the transcript of the Q&A. And if we keep everything there, that keeps everything consolidated. Your questions can also help others. So if you can remember to, yes?
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make a plea for folks, if you can, don't feel shy and not submit questions anonymously. It would immensely help me follow your thread if you have several questions, to know that they're all from you, and it would be helpful for later on. Sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next. So, as we've said, introduce yourself. All of these materials will be recorded and shared with you, so don't feel like you have to scribble everything down. Next, Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates. There's part of our team there. These are our two organizations, our two sister organizations. Californians for the Arts is your statewide arts advocacy service organization, and California Arts Advocates is the direct lobbying arm of the two organizations. Next. As I said, as we've talked about, questions are welcome throughout. Beatrice will answer them as they come in. We also have specific spots that we stop to go over Q&A so everything doesn't accumulate and pile up. There's a lot of dense information to share, and we like to break it up. Also, if anything comes up that Beatrice feels like needs to be addressed immediately, she will throw up the red flag and stop me, and we will address things right there. Next. As I mentioned, there is a document with all of the links included that Martha's probably already shared in the chat. Next. In that same document, there are some Zoom tips to help make your Zoom life hopefully a little easier. Those are also shared here. The first is that you can turn on the closed captioning down at the bottom for that assistance. Next. Also remember that you can set up the view for whatever works best for you. It does not impact anyone else. It only impacts you. So that is there. Next. Our wonderful community partners. One of our largest goals in helping to administer this grant is to make sure that everyone in the state that is potentially eligible knows about the program. There are two reasons for that we'll talk about a little bit more later, in addition to wanting to make sure, obviously, that everybody needs the help, gets the help. It is also, quite frankly, part of our advocacy efforts to try to make this funding ongoing. The more people that apply, the easier it is for us to make the case to the legislature that there is a need for these monies to continue. So we have partnered with these great organizations around the state, some of them geographic, some of them genre specific, to help us spread the word. And one of the things that all these organizations are doing is co-hosting a webinar like you are at today. Next. So we have a whole series of webinars. In fact, we've also just added one that will be up later today on March 4th at noon that will be co-hosted. Bringing us to today's webinar next with our fabulous friends from Arts Orange County. We have here today both Patrick Breen and Rick Stein, who I'm going to introduce and let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about Arts Orange County. Take it away.
Thank you, Terry. So I'm Rick Stein, President and CEO of Arts Orange County. We're the independent nonprofit countywide arts council serving all of Orange County and designated by our Board of Supervisors as the state local partner. I had the privilege of serving for 12 years on the board of California Arts Advocates and Californians for the Arts, including 3 terms as its president. Before we had a staff, so we have a wonderful staff now, and they're doing great things. And one of the things that they worked very hard on was this program, advocating for a program to help performing arts organizations deal with the aftermath of the AB5 legislation, and of course, compounded by the pandemic impact. So I'm so glad to have so many performing arts organizations from our community participating today, as well as those from elsewhere in the state who found this to be a more convenient day and time. And I hope that you will all be eligible to apply, that you all will apply quickly, and you'll be hearing more why that's so important. And we wish you luck in the process, and we hope that we can get the money out the door to you quickly and help what you're doing, because it is so important to our arts ecology. I'm now going to introduce Patrick Bryan to add a few words as well.
Thank you, Rick. So yeah, it's been wonderful to be able to work with Terry and the team, Martha, Sophie. It's truly an honor to be able to spread the word about something that is so vital to our community. And we at Arts Orange County are actually bringing in others throughout Southern California. Riverside Arts Council, who I used to serve as the executive director for many years. Arts Connection, which is the Arts Council in San Bernardino County. Also the North County Coalition for the Arts, that's Imperial County, the Ventura County Arts Council, and Arts Council for Kern. It's up in Kern County. So we find that being able to reach directly into your community, often with people that you know directly, is so important. And these other state local partners are not only our friends and colleagues, but they have a much deeper insight into their own communities. So that's why we thought it was important to bring them to the table. So Terry, I'm going to turn it back over to you and the team.
Okay, excellent. Next, so, okay, before we dive into all of the details and nitty gritty, I do like to take just a moment to celebrate and remind everybody that advocacy does in fact work. It is the only reason we are here today. As both Rick and Patrick talked about, this program came about because of advocacy, not only from organizations like Californians for the Arts, but from the advocacy of organizations around the state, of arts advocates stepping up, calling their legislators, sending letters, coming to rally, as is pictured here, coming to Advocacy Day to say, first we had to get the program passed, then we had to get the program funded the following year, and then last year we had to save the program funding when it was almost taken away during the May revise. So your voices are heard. We deeply appreciate everything everyone did to get us here. And as we have mentioned, The battle begins now to keep the funding coming, because right now this is a 1-year funding for this program. Okay, next, let's get to the real nitty-gritty. So why are we here? What is the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund, besides a mouthful? It was created to support small, nonprofit performing arts organizations, those with revenues under $2 million, in hiring and retaining employees. The fund reimburses a portion of payroll costs on a quarterly basis, and the program's goal is to restore resilience and build sustainability in the sector through an investment in creative jobs. These are not Californians for the Arts dollars. These are state dollars. The program is administered by the Office of the Small Business Advocate, lovingly referred to as Cal OSBA. And then they have brought in Californians for the Arts to manage the process. But these are your state's tax dollars at work. We are excited to be here to manage the process, and applaud Cal OSBA's decision to bring in industry specialists. It was very important to them, understanding that we are a unique industry, that it was important to them to have a partner to bridge the communication and the development of this program so that it did everything it could to serve the industry. The application portal will open on March 10th, 2025 at 9 a.m. And applications will be reviewed in the order they are received, which is why your preparation beforehand is so important. Though you can't submit your application until March 10th, there is a great deal you can be doing over these next couple of weeks to prepare so that on March 10th, all you're doing is filling in the answers and uploading documents. Next. Okay, so who can apply for this program? Both 501c3s and also Model C fiscally sponsored organizations. We will talk about both. There are 2 separate applications. Both go to the same portal, but there are separate applications with slightly different document requirements. Next. So this grant is not one that is built on a lot of narrative. This is very specific eligibility criteria that are determined through providing information and very specific documents. So you're not so much pitted against each other as you are put in order. There are limited funds. We only have roughly $12 million, and we estimate that the demand is much higher. So you are encouraged to prepare your documents beforehand so that when the portal opens, you are ready to go and can get your application in as quickly as possible, but also as accurately as possible. You don't want to slow yourself down later because we can't read your documents or anything like that. Okay, so what are these eligibility criteria? As we mentioned, you have to be either a 501c3 or a Model C fiscally sponsored organization. You have to be producing or presenting performing arts that are open to the public. You have to be hiring and paying workers as employees, not independent contractors, but W-2 employees. You have to be in compliance with California labor laws, including those around the proper classification of employees. As Rick mentioned, and we all should be aware at this point, a few years ago, AB 5 was passed, which changed the way classification is determined for employees versus independent contractors. It is very important that you are aware of those and that you are properly classifying your employees, your workers, because your authorized signer will have to sign off that you are in fact in compliance with California labor laws. And if it is found later that you are not, that you have falsely signed your certification for that or other things, then the state can come back and take the money back. And none of us wants that to happen. You also have to be in compliance with California sexual harassment training requirements. We have a link here so you can go to the state site and brush up on what those specific requirements are, because they do vary slightly for organizations of different sizes. There are also different requirements for permanent employees and seasonal employees. So we're not going to dive into all of that, but we are going to encourage you to go to the site, check what the requirements are for your organization, and make sure you are in compliance. The good news is there's not a time frame on that compliance. So you don't have to have been in compliance for 3 years. When you submit your application, you have to be in compliance. So now is your opportunity, if you're not, to get your organization into compliance. 2 other things, you have to have a written DEI policy and a written anti-harassment policy. Those have to be in place, again, when you submit your application. You will be uploading those 2 policies along with the date they were passed and when they were last updated. Some of the information in the eligibility criteria, you're going to be asked questions, and the fact that you answer the question or not impacts your eligibility. The answer itself does not necessarily. You have to have a DEI policy. You are not going to be evaluated on when it was passed or when it was last updated. You also have to have a mission statement. You have to be certified as in good standing by the California Secretary of State. The link here, which is also in the document and in the program guidelines, to take you to the Secretary of State website where you can look up your standing. And there is a button there that's shown later in the stack. To download, there is a very specific certificate of good standing. You need to download that certificate. It needs to be less than 30 days old when you submit it with your application. And you need to get the actual certificate. You can't just take a picture or a screenshot of the website. Next, you're going to need to be able to, oh, I'm sorry, Sophie, that was totally my bad. You're going to need to be able to provide 990s for the last 3 filed tax years. So not the last 3 years, but the last 3 completed and filed tax years. For those of you that file the 990 in, you will be required to provide the CTTR1 because the 990 in is just a postcard, doesn't give any financial information. For the fiscal sponsors, for the fiscally sponsored organizations, the requirement instead of a 990 will be a financial statement, and we'll talk about that more. You have to have adjusted average annual revenue under $2 million, and we'll go over how that's calculated. And you have to not fall under a list of specifically ineligible organization types. So now next, Sophie. Okay, so this list of types of organizations are specifically ineligible. So if your primary mission as an organization is one of these things, then you will not be eligible. If your primary mission is, in fact, the producing and performing of performing arts, but you also happen to have a youth program, that is acceptable. It's just the primary mission of the organization needs to be those performances that have adult performers, paid performers. Okay, next. Questions? Beatrice, do you have anything you want to go over at this juncture?
We are very quiet on the Western Front, and I want to encourage you to ask questions. I'm here to answer your questions, folks.
See, right now they're here and they're taking in the information. They're assuming I'm going to help. So, okay, then let's go on to the program overview. All right. The way this program works is it's all reimbursement. You do not get any upfront before you spend it money. And it is specifically reimbursement of payroll expenses. And that reimbursement percentage is based on this 3-year adjusted gross revenue. So, knowing that annual revenue can sometimes be inflated by things like capital campaign, there are 3 types of income that the statute allows you to exclude when we're calculating your gross annual revenue. The first of those is revenue designated by the grantor or donor solely for capital expenditures. The second type is pass-through funds collected for the benefit of another organization, such as if you serve as a fiscal sponsor for fiscal sponsees, and so you have additional income in your revenue that isn't actually impacting your direct productions, your direct operations each year. The final one, which is a little confusing, is written as funds received pursuant to section 8753.6. What this actually is special funds through the California Arts Council. These are not the general public annual grants. If you get an operating grant from the CAC, that's not what can be excluded. If you are part of Creative Corps or are part of cultural districts, those are not the excluded. These are specifically if you get funds directly from Keep Arts in the Schools Fund or the Arts License Plates Fund. And so you're going to fill out a chart. It's going to ask you these specific things. And if you have funds that fall into these three specific categories, it will take that out when you're doing the calculation. Once you have that calculation, then this handy chart here shows you the percentage of your eligible payroll expenses that you will be able to be reimbursed. The program goes on a sliding scale, with the smallest organizations receiving the largest percentage of reimbursement. So those organizations that have an adjusted gross revenue under 250,000, they receive an 80% reimbursement. Those that are between 1.75 million and 2 million, they will receive a 20%. So that's structurally what we're looking at. Next. So this is the chart that we talked about that will be in the application. These forms will be available beforehand for you to download. They're in the application guidelines now. So you can fill this out, have it waiting, ready to be uploaded. And then you'll see that the chart will do the math for you. Next. Okay, the term of the grant is in fact 1 year, and it covers reimbursements for 4 quarters. 2 of those quarters are retroactive, so you'll be providing actual expenses, and 2 of those quarters are projected. So we have Q3 and Q4 of 2024 and Q1 and Q2 of 2025. The reason that we do it, well, the reason there are projected expenses here is, as we mentioned, there are limited funds here, but we want to be able to, because we're giving people a grant for a year, to be able to say, this allotment of money is set aside for you for the year. We don't want to run out of money, tell you you have a grant, and then you come back for the 4th quarter and we're like, sorry, we ran out of funds. So therefore, we need a set amount for each application, so we know how many applications we can approve. We'll go into the calculations of this more, but so that you do know, there are those 4 quarters, partly already expended and part projected. The other thing to remember is whether you are on a fiscal year separate than the calendar year, these quarters are calendar quarters for everyone. They're the same for calendar quarters. Next. Okay, so what is reimbursable? Employee wages, no independent contractors. When I say employee, I literally mean legally W-2 employees. If you're not paying somebody and they don't, in a way that they get a W-2 at the end of the year, then they're not an employee in this definition. Also, workers' comp expenses. The expenses you pay as the employer, your annual premium, those are reimbursable. Pension, retirement, health benefits that you provide to your employees, the employer expenses for those are reimbursable, as are the amount you pay a payroll company, a paymaster, Gusto, to process your payroll. Those are all of the expenses that are reimbursable. The things that are not reimbursable are payroll taxes, both federal and state, and that includes both the portion of payroll taxes that the employer pays, but it also includes the part that is withheld from the employee wages. So when you fill out the chart for this, you're going to, one of the questions that's going to be asked is, what were the taxes withheld from the employee so that it can be properly calculated. These expenses are all calculated per quarter and per employee. So what you're going to provide is these amounts broken down per employee. And we'll go over the details on this later. These reimbursements are capped at $10,000 per employee per quarter. Once you add up all of the expenses, take out the taxes, if that is more than 10,000, then you're still capped just at 10,000. Now, of that 10,000, what you receive is the percentage that was established by your revenue tier. So if you are less than $250,000, you're not going to receive 10,000 per employee. You're going to receive 80% of that. Okay, next, I think, so this just gives you a little bit more detail on what defines each of these different categories. One of the things that you will be asked, because again, there's going to be a handy dandy chart that you can download beforehand and fill in. They're fillable PDFs. And for each employee, you're going to fill out a line, fill out a row. And one of the first questions that asks is the hourly wage. This is not part of the calculation for reimbursement. One of the requirements of the grant is that you be paying everyone at least minimum wage for your area. So if your city or county has a higher minimum wage than the state, then you have to be paying everyone at least that minimum wage. The other thing that is true is many of us pay the same employee at different rates. Sometimes someone might be an electrician, and another times a violinist. And so what you're going to look at is what is the lowest hourly wage you pay someone, and that's what you're going to enter in this box. Also, if somebody is on salary, you're going to calculate what their hourly wage is, and that's what you're going to enter here. Don't worry if you think, oh my goodness, that's not going to make sense with the gross wages. We're not collecting the hours. We're not calculating the gross wages from the hourly wage. The hourly wage is a question you're answering so that we can establish that you are in fact paying people at least a minimum wage. Remembering again that what you're entering here is all just W-2 employee expenses. Even if you are in a situation where you legally have independent contractors, you cannot be reimbursed for independent contractor expenses through this program. Next. Okay, now we've thrown a lot of numbers at you. How are we doing for questions now, Beatrice? You're muted.
They're asking questions. I'm answering.
Yay.
All is well.
Okay.
I don't think there's any that require immediate addressing. I'm getting to them as we go.
Okay, perfect. Next. All right, so let's talk about how this process is going to work. As we mentioned, Californians for the Arts is managing this program for the state. We are the ones you will be dealing with, but the final deciders are in fact the state. So on March 10th at 9 a.m., the portal will open. You will submit your applications along with your documentation for your for those Q3 and Q4 payroll expenses. We will review the applications in the order received and as submitted. If we have questions, if we can't read your documents, if you've answered in such a way that we need additional information, we will contact you and ask you for clarification. You want to try to provide your information up front as cleanly and clearly as possible, because if we have to take you out of line to collect additional information for you, you're going to fall back in that order received. Once we have reviewed everything, we will pass it along to the state for final determination. And we will then contact you after the state makes that final determination to let you know if you have been deemed to be ineligible, and if so, why. Or happy days if you have been deemed to be eligible, and what the maximum amount of your grant will be. And we'll talk about why I'm saying maximum amount. Because it is the state and nothing moves quickly in a state of our size, it will then be 45 to 90 days before checks are rolling. When you are approved, you will receive a grant agreement and get that back. And then from that point, once we receive your grant agreement back, that's when the 45 to 90 days will begin. I realize that's a long period of time. The thing that you can control is your communications and your interactions. If we reach out to you, get back to us quickly. When we send you the grant agreement, get back to us quickly. All right. So then after the end of the first quarter of 2025, those organizations that have been approved will then submit their actual expenses, because you submit with your application your projected expenses for payroll. But now you're going to submit your actual expenses for Q1. Those will then be approved and processed. And again, 45 to 90 days for checks. The same drill will be repeated after the end of Q2, so roughly during the month of July. There'll be a submission process. You'll submit your actual numbers, your documentation. That will be approved. And then the final step will be a report in the fall. That will be still, we're talking about numbers here. You'll be talking about the number of jobs that you supported and sustained through the process. Next, this kind of breaks down that information of the timeline. Again, important things to remember are that we're talking calendar quarters here, and that, as I mentioned, there is at this point only funds for 1 year cycle. So the next step for all of us will be advocating to have this become an ongoing problem. Next. Okay, the way that we're processing these applications is in a portal called GoSmart. So let's go next. The first step with the GoSmart portal is that you'll go and set up your account. You can do this now. You can't actually submit your application, start on the physical application until March 10th, but you can go now and set up your account, and I encourage you to do so. There is a link here to a tips page about operating in the GoSmart portal. They have some great little videos, tutorials about getting set up. Next. All right, so this is about setting up your GoSmart portal. A couple things to keep in mind. First, when you set up, you want to set up as an organization. This grant opportunity is only open for organizations. So if you create an account and you select individual instead of organization, and you go back to apply, you won't be able to. This is the information you will need listed here to set up your account. This information will carry over into your application, but this you will need to provide as you're setting up your account. For fiscal sponsors, this is the fiscal sponsor who will set up the account, not the fiscally sponsored organization. And this information that you're filling out here will all be about the fiscal sponsor. Fiscal sponsors, if you are, as a 501c3, meet the eligibility requirements for the grant, you can also apply separately for your own 501c3, and then you can submit up to 10 fiscally sponsored applications. You will need to set up one account, and then for each of the 10 fiscally sponsored organizations, you will do a separate application. This portion of the portal is set up by GoSmart and is part of the multi-state portal, which is why you'll find a couple of these labels, specifically the state house district. Here in California, as you all know, we have an assembly, not a house. So that should say state assembly, but I think you can make that transition. And there's a way here for you to look up your legislators, what district your organization is in. This is important information because not only part of our ongoing advocacy efforts, but the state has a responsibility to report back to the legislators, and legislators always want to know, how is my district directly impacted? And filling this out helps us be able to do that reporting. Okay, next. Okay, there are two separate applications, one for 501c3s, one for fiscally sponsored organizations. When you go, make sure you start the right application. We're not going to go through every question in the application here today because I didn't want the webinar to be 3 hours long. However, the program guidelines that you can download do have all of the questions. And there's one section that covers all of the questions and information for the 501c3 application, and one that covers all of the questions for the fiscally sponsored organization. I encourage you to treat this like you're in school and this is your study guide. You have the opportunity now to download it, to know every question you're going to be asked. You can prepare those answers, and you know every document. So you can go ahead and prepare all of your documents now, double check your documents, and be ready to go on the 10th. Next. Okay, so as we talked about, this is all about information. So the first thing you're going to do is fill out organizational information. And as I said, some of this is in the original account and some is once you start the application. The application is going to ask for both a primary contact and an authorized signer. These two things can be the same person if that's what works best for your organization, but they do not have to be. The authorized signer must be an authorized officer listed on your statement of information on file with the Secretary of State. This has to be someone who has the legal authority to sign for your organization. For fiscal sponsors, this is the fiscal sponsor organization, not the fiscally sponsored. Because the grant for the fiscal sponsors is officially with the fiscal sponsor, not with the fiscally sponsored. When you are setting up your account, that should be a primary contact. You want the person listed as the account holder and listed as the primary contact to be someone who is actively monitoring that email address, and it to be an address that is actively monitored. Because any communications about your grant, from, we can't read your 501c3 letter, we need a new one, to, yes, you've been awarded and here's your grant agreement, are going to come to that email address. If your authorized signer is the board treasurer, who has a tendency to go on extended safaris and not check their emails for 3 weeks, you don't want your authorized signer to also be your primary contact, because you don't want emails sitting for 3 weeks because no one is checking that email. The other thing that I like to point out at this point is there are pieces of information that are asked for in the grant application that are included in the legislation. And there are also questions that are asked because it's part of our responsibility to the state to report on the use of state funds. So you will see, for example, here that your county is asked for, and also your primary performance venue size. This is the capacity. These are 2 questions that you will not be evaluated on what the answer is, but you must answer them. The primary performance venue, if you perform in multiple venues, decide which one you view as your primary. You are not going to be evaluated on the size. We're not putting preference to small venues or large venues. This is just a piece of data that the statute called for to be collected. Next, Okay, after the information, then we get to the documents. And you're going to upload this following list of documents. When it comes to the fiscal sponsors, the list is slightly different, and that is all outlined because you're going to upload certain documents that are related to the sponsor and certain documents that are related to the fiscally sponsored. Okay, so you're going to do your 501c3 determination letter, your articles of incorporation, that certificate from the Secretary of State that we talked about, the organization's filed Form 990s from each of the last 3 completed tax years. For those years, you're also going to provide your statement of activity or your profit and loss statement for those same years so that we have a little bit more detail. These can still be your summary statements, but many organizations on your 990, all of your revenues and all of your expenses will be grouped together. So if, for example, you have both a main stage and youth programming, and you want to be able to demonstrate to us that your main stage is your primary, and we can look to your expenses and see that you spend more on that programming, this is why we're collecting the additional information with the more detailed financial statements. This is where you're going to upload your organization's DEI and anti-harassment policies. Again, including on those policies the date they were adopted and when they were last updated. For some people, these statements might be included in an employee handbook, which is completely fine. You're still just going to, you don't have to upload your entire employee handbook, but extract those 2 pages or sections and upload them here. Next, all of these documents, while we're changing over, that we're talking about are all going to be submitted as PDFs. Please do not be sending in a picture that you took with your phone because we won't be able to review it. And they are all limited. Each individual document can be at most 10 megabytes, not the total of all the documents, but each individual document. And please do check your documents as you're preparing them. You want to make life easy as possible for the reviewers. So once you create a PDF, reopen it and make sure it's visible, viewable. It is also a good idea to have somebody else's computer look at this, because every once in a while we make a PDF on our computer, but somebody else goes at it, and for some reason it's really tiny, or it didn't go through that scanner quite as cleanly as we thought. So double check everything. All right. After your documents that establish that you are in fact a viable organization, now you're going to help us understand and prove to us that you are producing the live performing arts for the public and that are advertised to the public. So there's a lot of threes here, so hang in with me. You're going to select 3 productions from the last 5 years, each one from a different year. And for each of those productions, you're going to provide 3 pieces of evidence, 3 documents. There's a list of 6 kinds of documents. You can choose any 3 from that 6. And you're going to do 3, each one done as its own separate PDF for each of your selected productions. So we've got an example here. There's nothing magic about the example. If you want to do the exact same, the 3 same kind for each of your 3 examples, that's totally fine. Another thing that has caused people some concern here is reviews. We understand it's not easy for everybody, particularly if your organization only does single day performances. Not everyone can get reviews. That's why there's 6 different things to choose from. All right. So say, for example, your organization did Angels of America in 2021, and you want Angels in America. Sorry, not Angels of America. In 2021, and you're going to provide a box office report, evidence of a paid advertisement, and a review. And then you're going to go to another year from the last 5 years, and you're going to say in 2023, we did a production of The Shot. And for this one, I'm going to select to provide evidence of paid advertisements, a review, and a playbill. By playbill, it just means program. And then for your final production of Helvetica in 2024, you're going to provide a box office report, social media post, and an email campaign post. Again, what you're trying to establish here is that you have done at least 3 different productions in 3 different years, and that those were productions that were available to the public and advertised. Okay, next. So the next thing we're going to look at is your income. We talked about this before, so I'm not going to go into detail here, but this is where you're going to provide the total revenue as we talked about. There's going to be that table. You're going to provide your total revenue, then anything that you have done or restricted funds, there'll be a column for pass-through funds, there's a column for, and the funds restricted, those special CAC funds. Then the table will do the calculation for you. And you're going to do this for the same 3 years that match the 990s and financial statements that you have provided. And that just needs to be 3 of the last 5 years. So if you had some special circumstance in 23 and you had an extension and you haven't filed yet, it's fine. You can do 20, 21, and 22. And again, these tables are available. You can download them beforehand, fill them out, save them on your computer, and be ready. Next. Okay, so now we come to the payroll expenses. And this is going to be 4 separate spreadsheets, 1 for each quarter that we have referred to. The first 2 are your actual expenses from Q1 and Q2. No, I'm sorry, Q3 and Q4 of 2024. And we've talked about the different categories. You're going to put the employee's name, their hourly wage, and those other calculations that we have talked about. The form will then do the math for you, show you what your reimbursable payroll expenses should be after everything is added up. And then you take out the taxes withheld. It will cap at 10,000. Remember that 10,000 is not the amount you would be receiving. You need to go back and refer to your revenue table and see what percentage you are eligible for. Okay, next. Projected expenses. This one's a little bit more confusing. I understand, because we're talking about projected expenses. And this is going to create basically a not to exceed. Your grant will be based on, if you are approved, the actual expenses for Q3 and Q4 and your projected expenses for Q1 and Q2. If your actual expenses for Q1 and Q2 of 2025 are less than you project, then that's what you will receive. Your reimbursement will be based on your actual expenses, not your projections. If, however, your real expenses are more than your projected expenses, then you will still be limited to your projected expenses. So it behooves you to take a good look at what you expect your expenses to be and be as realistic as possible. We do ask that you not wildly exaggerate just to protect yourself, because ultimately what you are doing by doing that is probably locking other people out of the potential for grants, because those funds will be locked up under your grant. And then when it comes to reimbursement, you won't actually get them anyway, just because you projected high. You'll only get whatever your actual expenses are. When we are approving grants, we are going to approve them and be watching that tally. So we're going to approve your grant and say, okay, this one's approved. It would be for $100,000. And then we'll take that out of our total allotment. So we know when we think we have expended all the funds. Then we're going to continue to approve grants because of this projected expense issue. Because we all know sometimes we plan to do shows that don't happen, other things happen. So some of these grants will end up being smaller. And by pre-approving some applications that will be held onto a wait list, We then have applications we can automatically start processing if there are leftover funds. It also, frankly, part of the reason that we will approve additional applications to go onto the wait list, and you will be told whether you're on the fully approved or on the wait list, is that helps us make the case to the state about the actual need for these funds. Um, so again, for these projected expenses, you're going to break this down by employee. We understand that you might not know the names of the employees for Q1 and Q2 of 2025. So you can put in the name of the position. So for example, performer 3, violinist 2, electrician 1. You still need to break it down by each individual that you will be paying because the expenses are capped at $10,000 per employee. So you're doing a show with 15 actors. You're going to put in a line for each of those 15, in addition to the rest of your employees. The forms for the payroll expenses, I believe, have 30 lines on them. If you have more than that, just create additional pages, and there will be a way for you to update those additional pages, to upload those additional pages. Okay, next. For all of these payroll expenses, you're going to have to provide documentation, just like you will have to for the revenue, any of the excluded revenue that you submit, you'll have to provide documentation for that. Because different structures of organization have different paperwork, we're not providing a hard and fast list here, but you want to be able to document the expenses that you are submitting for. The most straightforward for your payroll expenses, quite frankly, is your quarterly tax statement to the state, because that will list the person's name, their gross wages, their withhelds. I understand that for some paymasters, because the paymaster is the employee of record, not everyone has their quarterly statement. And so that's why we have other allowances here, because some paymasters don't provide that to the individuals because they do one group tax filing. So instead, you can provide a quarterly payroll register from your paymaster or third party. What you can't do is just make up your own spreadsheet. So we need some sort of documentation from a verifiable third party of these expenses. Workers' comp, health pension, and also your payroll paymaster fees. Some of these get complicated also to report on an individual person basis, most especially workers' comp. What you want to do there is look at your amount, do a calculation so you can represent per an employee, and then along with the evidence that you upload, include a page in the PDF that explains your calculation. My workers' comp premium for the year is $5,000. I divided that by 4 quarters, and each quarter I divided by the number of employees. Some of us have more specific breakdowns from workers' comp, and it's done by the different classifications. Some people pay workers' comp on a flat percentage, so everyone's paid the same. You include documentation of what you spent, and include an explanation of how you did the calculation for the number that you included next to each employee's name. And do the same for your health, pension, retirement, and also your payroll paymaster fee. Next. Before I jump to Beatrice in the questions, you're going to provide that documentation with your application for Q3 and Q4. Q1 and Q2, that's going to come later if you're approved when you're submitting those actual quarters. Beatrice, math question.
Yes. Well, I've just a couple of statements, and I think we have several youth organizations in the attendees today, and I was asked the questions why in heaven's name were they not included, and that they are struggling as many of us are under AB5. And so I just wanted to take the moment, and Terry, you can elaborate, to say that they specifically are not included. And it does not mean that your organization is not doing great work and that we know you're struggling, but the statute excludes it at this point. Anytime you pass a statute, um, choices have to be made, and this is where this line was drawn at this point. It doesn't mean that future advocacy cannot result in this type of funding that would include youth organizations, but that just means we have a lot of work to do. Terry, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
I think that's very, very well said. The reality is it's not that anyone doesn't value youth organizations, um, or the importance that they have, or the realization that they too are struggling. The goals of this particular legislation was to support organizations, and it was backed largely by around performers that are paying performers. And youth organizations are not doing that specific thing. I think what Beatrice said is most important, and that is this is a brand new program. It was a brand new idea when it was presented. It is not only the first of its kind in the state, but we believe it's the first of its kind in the nation. And legislators, are concerned about amount of money and sizes of programs. And so there were limitations that had to be placed in order to get the program approved and the foot in the door. Our hope is that it's successful, that we can demonstrate a huge impact, and then we can go back and make updates and join the advocacy and expand this, because we do understand that you do have paid employees with youth organizations. It's just as Beatrice said, there are lines that have to be drawn with any program, and it's never fun. And those are the ones that are in the legislation. I will take that moment also to let you know that because this is a grant that is not like a foundation grant, where the foundation itself is setting the guidelines and has the ability to make allowances, make adjustments. Because this grant is workforce development funds that were established by this piece of legislation, the eligibility requirements are locked in by this piece of legislation. And the only way to change those requirements is by another piece of legislation. So if we wanted to go back now and say, okay, we want to change the specific wording of the statute, we would have to put the program on hold, go back to the legislature, hope that we passed again, and hope that our money doesn't get taken away in the meantime. So that is why, unfortunately, we have to stick very, very closely to the letter of the legislation. Yes, Beatrice.
Another facet of that, if you are an eligible organization, if your primary purpose is to employ adults and pay them as a W-2 employees to present live performing arts for the public, then your ancillary program employees are also covered and you can get reimbursed for them, as well as your administrative employees. At that point, all your employees are reimbursable, all your payroll expenses. So I have had several people ask about that.
Okay.
And I think those are the major categories.
Excellent. Then let's go on to the next. Okay, as I talked about a little bit before, there are a number of questions that will be asked in the application, that whether you answer them or not impacts your eligibility. How you answer them does not. And this is a combination of specific questions that were written into the legislation. There are also specific responsibilities that Cal OSBA and Californians for the Arts have about information we have to gather to be able to report back to the state on how these taxpayer dollars are spent. So there are some questions, and these are all spelled out specifically in the program guidelines. It asks, for example, the percentage of payroll expenses within your budget for certain years, the number of employees you have, the number of independent contractors you had, the number you expect to have in 2025. None of the answers will impact your eligibility. We're not going to give grants to people who are going to hire more employees versus those that aren't. But if you don't answer them, that will impact your eligibility. So you have to answer, but you will not be evaluated on your answer. Next, certificate of compliance. There is a certificate that is available that you will download. There's one certificate for 501c3s. There's a separate one for fiscal sponsors. And this has to be signed by your authorized signer, your authorized signatory. But you can do it beforehand, sign it, then have it ready to upload. This person is going to be attesting to things like, yes, we're in compliance with the sexual harassment training. Yes, we are in compliance with California labor laws. No, we haven't had a judgment against us since this legislation passed. All of our answers are true and correct. All of those sorts of legalese. There are, a place where we have to document and dot I's and cross T's. As we all know, in the various relief programs and funds, the unfortunate reality of our world today is there are people who try to scam the system. And when you are giving away taxpayer dollars, the last thing anybody wants is that LA Times article, San Francisco Chronicle article, that talks about, the fake people or the ineligible people that were funded. And so there are some documentations and those kinds of things that we have to do to make sure we are doing our due diligence and our responsibility. Next. Okay, phew, you finished the application. It's been submitted. Yay. You will get an email confirmation. If you don't get an email confirmation in the first 10 to 15 minutes, go back into the portal and make sure that your application is showing as submitted. If it isn't, try to submit again. If you have any problems, if you do not have it showing submitted and you didn't get that confirmation email us immediately so we can help you figure out what is wrong. Don't wait for 3 weeks because that's going to impact, again, your place in line. As we talked about before, make sure your documents are clear and legible, because if we have to take you out to get things clarified, that's also going to impact your infamous place in line. Watch for communications. Check your spam filters. Okay, next. All right, resources. We have tried to provide you as many resources as we possibly can to make this as easy for you as possible. Next. Some of those are here. Some of them are also in the program guidelines. Some tips and helpful. Review the program guidelines and the application questions now. Don't wait until March 10th. Start preparing and getting your things ready. You can always come back to another webinar. Webinars are recorded. You can go back and watch them on the website. Email PAEPF@caforthearts.org with your questions, or you can make an appointment to set up an office hours with Martha. I will say I always strongly recommend submitting your questions by email as opposed to in a dialogue, because then you have documentation. You don't have to worry about, did you remember correctly? Did you write it down correctly? You have an actual documentation of the answer you were given, so you're not later playing he said, she said, she said, she said. And if there are instructions that were given, you have a record of them to go and execute them. So that's my personal strong recommendation. I'm not saying don't call if you feel more comfortable having a conversation in addition to, but just it's one of my recommendations. Go ahead now and set up your GoSmart portal so that if that is an issue, you're not doing it the morning of. Also, because the GoSmart portal is an existing portal through West Staff that is used for many different grants, if you have an existing GoSmart account with another organization, you will need to set up a new account specifically for this portal, for the Californians for the Arts portal. Double check that your authorized signer is on your statement of information and that that statement of information is up to date. Make sure that your primary contact is someone who's actively monitoring their email and will be responsive. And this other thing, and this is a good neighbor and also a part of the ongoing advocacy. Any other potentially eligible organizations that you know of, let them know, encourage them to apply. As I mentioned earlier, one of our most powerful pieces of advocacy for making the case that these funds are desperately needed and need to be replenished and ongoing is the response we get when this application, excuse me, portal opens. There were some great grants that were offered during COVID. There were some great relief grants. The reality is every one of them ended up being undersubscribed with money left over, specifically all of those that were for the arts. What this has done is created the impression in the mind of many legislators that we ask for more money than we need and that the need is not as great as we say. If this application opens and we have a huge response and the program is oversubscribed and we have a giant wait list, there is nothing that can more powerfully make the case to legislators that the need is great and that these funds should be ongoing. Next. Again, these are the tech tips for getting used to working in the portal. I strongly recommend. Next. This is, though a frightening looking slide, I grant you. It's a very handy slide to help you go look yourself up on the Secretary of State website, where you can see your status. You can also see the little picture there at the top where it says request certificate. That's what you're going to do to get your certificate that you're going to download. You also can, where it says view history, you can open up your statement of information and clarify that they're your actual current board members, your actual officers, and clarify who is an authorized signer. Next. Make sure that I can't say it frequently enough that you're using an email that is actively monitored. Next, ask for help. We're here. That email is actively monitored. We will give you questions. One of the things that I do like to remind people is this, as we said, is a brand new program. First for the state, first we think in the country, which means every once in a while, our response back to you is going to be, well, that's an interesting question, and let us take it to the state and get a determination. Because the world is full of strange situations. So if you think yours is unique, if you're not sure, ask the question and let us look into it. That is also a good point for if there is something in your application, if there's something in one of your documents that you think this is going to send up a red flag, this is going to be confusing. There's two things you can do. One, if it's a document, include a note on the top. If it so happens that the actual legal name of your organization is, the School for Theater, but it hasn't been a school in 20 years, the legal name just was never changed, then include a document to explain that. Anything that you feel like might cause pause, might slow down and cause people to say, put in a note. We're also going to include the very last question in the application is going to be, is there anything else you think we should know? Is there anything else you want us to know that you feel like might be confusing about one of your documents, etc.? That's the only narrative. But we do want to present that opportunity because it's a big world and there's lots of unique and different circumstances, and we want you to have the opportunity to put your best foot forward. Next. I would be remiss not to encourage you to support Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates as statewide service organizations It is as challenging for us, and even more so in many ways, to raise funds as it is for any other arts organization. The only reason we are here to serve the state, to advocate for programs like this, is because of our membership. And we would love to have you join us. And there's information there about doing that. Next. Another invitation I want to extend to everybody is coming up in April. We have on April 22nd in Sacramento, our annual Arts and Culture Summit, which is a fabulous day of networking and speakers and breakout sessions. The immediate past chair of the NEA will be the keynote speaker. It'll actually be an interview who should have some very interesting things to say. And so I encourage you to come and join us. I encourage you even more heavily to come and join us on the 23rd for the free event that is Arts Advocacy Day. We start in the park with a rally, and then everyone goes off for organized, scheduled meetings with their legislators. And one of the most powerful things you can do as an arts advocate is to, excuse me, go to your legislator and tell them how these funds, how arts funds impact you directly in their district. If you don't think that's the first question that every legislator asks when we go to them and ask them to support a program, you're crazy, because they want to know how it impacts their district. And for people to take the time and the effort to come all the way to Sacramento to come, excuse me, and talk to them makes a huge impact. So sign up for Advocacy Day, come up. It's fun, it's powerful, it's exciting. Last year, we had more than 200 people there having meetings with legislators. Okay, next. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to Arts Orange County. Thank you to my team. And thank you to all of you for your advocacy that helped make this possible, for your continued voice, and for helping us spread the word to make sure that every organization in the state knows about this opportunity and is ready to apply. Okay, Beatrice, we have 15 minutes. You got any more questions?
Yeah, I don't have questions, but I just wanted to say one thread that has come up is that there appear to be several organizations that are looking at starting to pay people. And I applaud you all. That's part of California Labor had a lot of participation in the statute, and I think that's probably, if you were to ask them, they would tell you that that's what they were hoping to see. So if you are starting to hire people now and you're going to be hiring and paying them within Q1 and Q2, please don't apply just because you don't have Q3 and Q4 from last year to be reimbursed. Like Terry said, the last thing we want is for not enough people to sign up for this. If we have a big, huge waiting list, we will go back and fight for more money, and hopefully, that would actually be an outcome that would help us extend this into the future. So yay for you. That's it.
Okay. That's great parting wisdom. Martha, do you have any parting wisdom you would like to share?
Just what Beatrice says, this program and advocacy go hand in hand, and the more people work with the program, the stronger our advocacy will be, and vice versa. So thanks for coming and welcome aboard the ride.
Patrick and Rick, do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to share?
I can't understate what you just said enough. Yeah, the fact that we just need people to apply, and we need you to apply quickly. Don't get shut out. Don't wait until the 11th even, because you don't want to say to yourself, oh, if only I had done like they suggested and got my paperwork together. It might look to many of you extremely difficult. It's not. It really isn't. Most of you have all of this information at your fingertips. You know where it is. You might just need to refresh your memory on how to find it, but if you start now, it's not going to be a problem.
Excellent.
And just thank you to California for the Arts, California Arts Advocates for the great advocacy work that led to this program, and also to the implementation and the informative webinar we had today.
All right. Okay. Beatrice, has this caused any flurry of final questions?
No, it has not. I just want to remind everybody, I jump up and down. This is just gathering documents. It's no long narratives. We should all be just doing a dance. So you can do this. Do it.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder, you will get email with the links, with the deck, with the program guide. We tried really hard in the program guide to give you everything to prepare you, give you links, give you resources, and to try to help you as much as we possibly can. So we're glad to have been here. We look forward to hearing from you. And what I look forward to most is a whole bunch of excited emails after people are approved. So thank you. And I gift back to you the best resource any of us can have, and that's time. You get 12 whole minutes back. So thank you. Have wonderful days. And we look forward to success stories. Thank you all. Have a great day.